Welcome back to Outdoors Type. In this video we're going to explore the main south line from Adelaide to Tailem Bend. And who knows, I might even do a bit of train spotting because this is still an active main line. The main south railway line from Adelaide travels east over the Mount Lofty Ranges to the Murray River at Murray Bridge and onwards to Victoria. Construction began in 1879 with the Adelaide to Nairne railway line. Things escalated quickly and the line progressed to the Victorian border by 1887. It opened to Nairne with 11 stations. Stations further east along the line to Tailem Bend on opening were Callington, Monarto, Murray Bridge and Tailem Bend. At the time it was built, the arduous route over the hills was single track for the entire way and included 9 tunnels and 3 large bridges. The idea of the South Line began as an aspiration in the 1850s to connect Adelaide with the River Murray and its trade. Routes were surveyed and proposed all over the hills in the mid-north, from Kapunda up north to the Sturt Valley and Wellington in the south. It wasn't until the 1860s that possible routes were brought back into focus again as the ironwork ordered for the bridge over the river at Edwards Crossing had arrived. However, it sat idle for nearly 5 years as Parliament bickered over its proposed location. Until they finally decided to build it where it was originally proposed for, here at Murray Bridge. It was about now that the idea that a railway line could be built to Victoria over the river here began to catch on. Still, it took nearly 10 years for the railway to make it here.
Construction of the line that we have today between Adelaide and eventually Melbourne finally commenced in 1879. It took over 800 men 4 years to complete the first stage from Mitcham to Nairne. They dug and blasted their way through 8 tunnels, deep cuttings and built 2 viaducts. The rubble and stone was shoveled into wheelbarrows, horse-drawn carts and hand-pushed rail trucks. Twin broad-gauge tracks and the big power era of the 1920s changed much of the landscape. 2 bridges were replaced altogether, the line strengthened and most stations upgraded. Suburban network platforms like Keswick, National Park, Monarto and Heathfield came and went, but the standardisation project in 1995 meant the line became 2 single tracks on 2 gauges. One broad gauge for suburban services owned by the state government, the other standard gauge for interstate and freight services owned by the federal government. Along with this conversion, stations on the Belair line at Mile End Goods, Hawthorn and Clapham closed. The other Belair line stations each had 1 platform closed.
Let's begin at Adelaide Station.
The first passenger train left Adelaide Station in 1856 on the Port Adelaide line, long before the South Line began. It grew larger and more important over the years until the grand neoclassical style building we see today was built in 1928 as part of what became known as the Big Power era. William Webb was the American imported as South Australian Railways Commissioner by the state government in 1922, and he came to revive South Australia's state rail system from the brink of collapse. Webb's American ideas and total overhaul of the South Australian railways had a profound effect on the development of the South Line, but the cost of that overhaul got way out of control. It always does, nothing's changed there, and it caused a lot of controversy and nearly brought the state close to bankruptcy at the onset of the Great Depression.
Some of the biggest changes to the Adelaide railway station and its precinct happened in the early 1980s with the ACER and the hotel development. So the biggest changes since the 1920s basically involved us just hiding the station and covering it all up with corporate concrete nightmares, turning the platforms into soulless utilitarian spaces and filling its once beautiful halls with a casino. All of this right next to Parliament House. What have they done here?
Back to 1887, and the South Line officially began where the privately owned Glenelg Railway branched off from the main North Line west of Morford Street Bridge. While not strictly part of the main South Line, Mile End Yards were once the largest locomotive depot and yards in the state, sprawling across most of the suburb. The opening of the Islington Freight Terminal further north in the 80s signalled the beginning of the decline of Mile End's importance. The yards were closed around 1990. Mile End Goods Station had 4 step-down platforms. It was closed and demolished in 1994.
Much of what was once the Mile End rail yards has now been converted into the Adelaide Interstate Railway Terminal, and iconic trains like the Overland, the Ghan and the Indian Pacific all call here. The main South Line is now way over there on the other side of the car stabling yards, and the freight section of the line runs just over that way to the west of the terminal.
Keswick Station opened in 1913 and was around in one form or another for 100 years until its closure and subsequent demolishing in 2013.
We're here at Adelaide Showground Station. The eyesore that you see behind me was built in 2014 and Keswick Station was closed. There was once a siding here to convey showgoers to the show from time to time.
Goodwood Station opened in 1883 and now has 3 platforms serving the broad gauge tracks of the Southern Metropolitan lines. The 4th and westernmost track, which is part of the standard gauge line to Melbourne, bypasses the 4th platform. The Glenelg tram line once crossed at a level junction just to the south of Goodwood. A wooden deck overpass was built in 1929 and replaced with concrete in the late 70s. Although the overpass crosses over the station, there's no interchange. The junction of the old Wollonga, now Seaford line, is totally different these days. A grade separation project removed this major bottleneck. The Goodwood Road underpass was built in 1914 to allow the tram to Clarence Park to pass under the main South Line. I guess that was a major bottleneck at the time. Millswood Station closed in 1995, but due to community pressure, reopened in 2014. Unley Park Station opened around the 1910s and temporarily closed in 1995 during gauge conversion. The western platform was demolished as part of this conversion. Hawthorn Station is now abandoned. It was opened sometime in 1910 and closed during the standardisation project. Mitcham opened originally with the line. It was initially the first place that trains could cross and featured, and still does, an impressive stone building incorporating a station master's residence. The first suburban train to Mitcham station was in 1899. Mitcham, Blackwood, Mount Lofty and Aldgate stations were all the same floor plan and included a station master's residence, telegraph station, post office and signal box. The up Clapham spur line became part of the double track, while the goods siding, used for loading firewood, remained for some years after. In the early 1900s there were army camps nearby to the station, and many men left for the First World War. Many of them never returned. Torrens Park Station was originally named Blythewood Station. In 1921, when Belair Road was diverted east of the line, platforms were built across the former road crossing. The western platform is now long gone. Clapham Station, now gone, has an interesting history. A spur line extended from Mitcham in 1905 to separate hills and suburban trains, and the original Clapham Station was located around 150 metres southwest of where it is today. The spur line diverged from the Belair line along what's now Price Avenue, terminating just north of Springbank Road. This meant trains could terminate at Clapham without getting in the way of the main line. Clapham Station was moved to its final location on the main line in 1915. Callington Station opened in 1946 to replace the Sleeps Hill halt about half a k south. The deep gullies around Linton and Sleeps Hill were once the site of large quarrying operations from 1884. Sleeps Hill had extensive sidings and even a platform in later years. For a short time, Sleeps Hill was a southern extent of SAR suburban train workings until the double track passed through the new tunnels to Eden Hills in 1916. The viaducts had been considered rickety ever since they were built. Eden Hills opened in 1912 as simply Eden. Just before the station on the left-hand side, an uphill siding stops runaway trains, and 3 original cottages still sit above the station. The flat area on the left, after the tunnel, was the brickworks, which made 8,000 bricks a day for the tunnels. There was no platform at Coromandel in the 1920s. Passengers had to flag the train down and climb on board using steps lowered from the train. It was originally called Brighton Parade and renamed Coromandel after World War II. At the Coromandel Parade Bridge nearby, the brick walls either side of the track are the remains of an original single rail tunnel. Blackwood was the first railway station to be opened in the hills. With the improved link to Adelaide, Blackwood became a desirable place to live. Houses and shops soon sprung up in the area. There's a bit to see around here. Take a walk around. We have the old water tower still in place there.
And we have these old red hen rail cars, I'm told, and the information that I have suggests that they were once from the Barker Junction Railway Resort.
Prior to 1911, here at the Belair road crossing at Callington, the crossing keepers had to rely on timetables to predict when the next train was approaching. Just west of Penera Station, one of South Australia's worst ever rail disasters happened in 1928. 6 workers were killed and 3 seriously injured when the tunnel they were demolishing for the overpass collapsed after heavy rain. Belair was originally the station for Government Farm, now Belair National Park. By the time the Hills Railway opened in 1883, it had become a popular tourist spot. Economy was the buzzword when it came to railways though, and Belair is the only timber station remaining on the Hills line. That's okay though, because a legacy of that is the beautiful station we see today.
These days, Belair is the terminus for suburban trains from Adelaide, and you can still head into the National Park. Stop a while because there's so much to see here, like the restored signal box and Heritage Pavilion. Let's go check it out.
So I've been here nearly 36 years as a volunteer. It was spent 10 years restoring it, and on the 24th of May 2003, International Volunteers Day, someone set fire to it and burnt it to the ground. We were very fortunate that we had the original plans from 1883. They were in imperial measurements, but we got it changed to metric. Hence, we started fundraising to have it rebuilt, which we did, and it was completed in 2010. The original levers are still in there. They were completely restored by one of our volunteers. His name was Ivan Brooks, and Ivan Brooks, who's now retired, spent nearly 18 months getting all the levers back to normal. Some of these items were donated to us because after the fire we lost quite a bit of really valuable stuff. 1890s, 1900s phone, pick up the handle and speak. Now this particular phone relates to our phone box out here, which we'll show you shortly. That was salvaged from the Upper Sturt Tunnel, which is a line to Mount Lofty going to Melbourne. We had that brought down here. We've now got a phone in there, so someone can be on the phone talking to someone else at the other end. Was where you paid for your tickets, and also you could book freight that would go from here to where we were lucky enough to keep. And this is all the old ticket system. In 1910 is when they built it onto where it is today to make it bigger. And if you have a look, the amount of people would come up here on the weekend. There's 4 trains a day.
So, thousands of people would come up here to go picnicking and whatnot. Yeah. Do you still see any numbers on weekends come through?
Everyone's got a car.
Yeah.
But we see a lot of tourists, they come up. Would get a billy of hot water for their tea.
a ton.
And the idea is that so when a train runs over, it doesn't flip it back.
There was once a turntable at the eastern car park end which was buried in the 1970s and later removed. Huge crowds of up to 1,000 people visited the national park on weekends and public holidays. Naturally, the station never sees crowds like that pass through anymore. Over the years, there were 3 stations inside Belair National Park for all the happy picnickers from Adelaide. They were National Park, Long Gully, and a stopping place at Nallawart. Foster's Corner is named after an engineman who experienced a derailment at the location many years later. National Park was established for picnic traffic, and the platform was built in the early 1930s and is now long overgrown and gone. Long Gully was originally a siding named 16.5 Mile Camp. The platform came later as Minnow and then was later renamed Long Gully by the looks. Upper Sturt Station was never provided on completion of the railway line. The government didn't want to provide one, but eventually they were made to. Mount Lofty Railway Station is a beautiful piece of South Australia's railway heritage. Opened in 1883, it's in a cool forested region of the Mount Lofty Ranges, exactly at the summit of the line to Nairne and Tailem Bend. Plenty is gone, like the staircase from the road, the original signal box and the shelter on the up platform. There were also goods sheds and sidings along with a turntable just a bit to the west. It was closed in 1987 and was renovated to become accommodation in the 90s through to 2018. In 2024, it was converted into a cafe, gift shop and nursery, and now everyone can look inside this historic set of buildings. It's a great example of how space can be reactivated to make it safer and more amenable while giving the community access to heritage. All 3 lines are now standard gauge, and many freight and passenger trains rumble through daily. Well, a few of the stations that were basically on the suburban passenger line between Mount Lofty and Bridgewater are now long gone. This is the site of the old Heathfield platform. It's a similar story with Monarto. There's nothing remaining. The platform was originally just the other side of this railway crossing. It was removed in 1994 and it really just looks like someone's garden railway now. Similar to Blackwood in its design, Aldgate Station opened in 1883 and a second platform was added soon after. It was the terminus of the line for about 8 months and had all the facilities. The westbound platform was converted to an island platform in 1929, and in 1974 the goods siding was replaced by a second crossing loop. When it closed to local trains in 1987, it still had 3 platforms and was available for passengers wanting to board the Mount Gambier railcar service until 1990. The island platform was demolished in the 90s, and the side platform remains in place but no longer in use. The crossing loop was removed when the line was converted to standard gauge in 1995, and the building now houses a community centre. This is the site of the old Gibilla or I don't know. Either way, they've done a pretty good job of removing it. Here we are looking at the site of the old Carapook station, again demolished along with the other suburban line stations after standardisation of the line. Absolutely nothing remains. This was the last of the suburban line stations before Bridgewater. Cox Creek was originally crossed by a large wrought iron bridge replaced with an embankment sometime in the 1920s. The only remains are the abutments and one of the pillars poking through the embankment rubble. Bridgewater Station opened with the line in the early 1880s. The original buildings were simple second-class timber designs. There was also a siding provided for the Bridgewater Mill. It once had 3 platforms and was the terminus for Adelaide suburban trains from 1978. It closed in 1987 and was demolished bit by bit from 1990 to 2006. You know, a lot of the time exploring these abandoned railway lines and abandoned railway stations just usually means that sort of sifting through empty areas that have become garbage dumping grounds or places for the homeless to sleep. It's sometimes a bit dirty and disgusting, and unfortunately Bridgewater is kind of one of those places. Ambleside Station closed in 1966. This station was reasonably substantial, but it's a ghost station now, and no trace remains. Balhannah was provided with the basic, yet still beautiful timber station buildings when it opened with the line. Further changes were to come when it became the junction station for the Mount Pleasant line in 1919. Mount Barker Junction was the junction of the line that headed to Mount Barker and Victor Harbour. Locomotive sheds and turntables were added in 1886 on completion, and the station once had an island platform, timber station building and signal cabin. The locomotive facilities closed and moved away in 1917. Nairne was the first terminus of the original Hills Railway line, and it was established with a stone station and goods shed. Not much consideration was given to any further facilities, as Nairne became a through station just a couple of years later. In the short time it was the terminus, it was actually run as a branch from Mount Barker. Callington station was originally 2 platforms with a main line passing through the middle and a goods siding on the southern side of the platforms. It closed in 1982. The original station sign is still in use at the National Railway Museum. The old station master's house and water tower are now private property. After crossing the Bremer Scarp and a long straight stretch through the scrub, the line reaches Monarto South, formerly Monarto. The station and yard was similar to Callington. It opened in 1886 and became a junction station with the opening of the Sedan line in 1919. The station was demolished sometime after 1995 and the building moved to Old Tailem Town. The line now passes through the Gifford Hill Range and follows Rocky Gully Creek down to Murray Bridge. Kinchina siding was built near here in 1967 to carry stone to the proposed Chawilla Dam project, which never came to be. The name Murray Bridge initially applied only to the railway station. Before the bridge came, the area was known as Edwards Crossing and then Mobilong, before becoming Murray Bridge in the 1940s. Before the railway arrived, there was some confusion as to where the goods yard would be built. Initially, it was to be built where the loco depot was, but plans were swapped. When the railway arrived in 1885, the town was being put on the map not just as a river crossing, but also as a river port and loco changeover point. The port of Mobilong was declared in 1886 and was to become one of the 3 largest in the Murray-Darling Basin, along with Morgan and Echuca. The wharf sidings followed and soon became the town's main goods yard despite local protests. The Alfred Benithan designed Art Nouveau influenced station building we see today was built in 1914 and bigger refreshment rooms added in the 1920s. A notable accident occurred in 1920 when 15 runaway rail trucks ran all the way downhill from Monarto and into the back of an empty passenger train at 75 miles per hour. Fortunately, nobody was injured.
We're where the loco sheds and yards used to be for the old Murray Bridge depot, and there's still a fair bit here. You know, you've got this, which must have been some kind of loading ramp. You've got some of the sheds there, still some of the switchboards. And here is Murray Bridge Station today, otherwise known as the local trolley return point. Well, that's a bit of a tour around the Murray Bridge Station precinct. There's heaps to see here if you know where to look. You've got the station itself, you've got the old loco depot and turntable, you've got the signalman's cottage and the railwayman's cottages over here, you've got the two cuttings, then you can go down to the wharf and have a look there as well. There's plenty to see here, so it's well worth coming out and having a look.
Leaving the station and heading east, the line originally ran through a cutting to line it up with the old shared road bridge, where you can still see the broad gauge rails in the cutting there. The new alignment was built through a cut and cover tunnel to a new railway bridge in 1925.
Way back when this was all a very busy wharf and goods yard, this was the old shell depot. This is likely what remains of the old line to the flour mill. There's a fair bit of line stretching into the park there. After climbing out of the river valley, the line now heads easily across undulating limestone country. Monteith siding was established in 1911 and once had a platform and sidings, of which there are no trace now. It was in the web era of the 1920s that Tailem Bend superseded Murray Bridge as the main marshalling yard. The heavier locomotives proposed for the hills section of line wouldn't be able to haul the same loads as the country locos, and trains would need to be broken down to head west over the hills and reformed to head east across the desert. Tailem Bend was also by then the junction for the Murraylands lines, and it made more sense to sort those trains there. By 1926, Tailem Bend had become a massive and important railway yard with workshops to the east, depots, sheds and goods sorting platforms. The old yards at Murray Bridge were closed. Fast forward to 2025 and the space for the yards is still here, but it's only a shadow of what they once were. Right, well, while we're here in Tailem Bend and the info station and railway museum is open, let's head in and have a look. But everything's in really nice cases here. Everything's been really well kept. Absolutely priceless, and that'll give you an indication of just how big this yard once was. There are loco sheds and a turntable just outside of Tailem Bend, and there is a railway group there operating some active trains, but we're yet to see any access or see anything come out of that. Maybe one day we will get some access and something will happen there. The railway line these days is a standard gauge, heavy duty, straight through line from Adelaide to Victoria. The only freight loading facilities are at Tailem Bend, and the only passenger loading facilities are at Murray Bridge. When this line was taken over by Australian National all the way through to Belair, it really spelt the end of regional rail for South Australia. Well, that's it, folks, and thanks for watching. Look, I may have missed some places in this video. I picked up a bit of footage that I hadn't expected to find as well. There's lots to know about this line, so hopefully you've picked up a little bit here, and you can use the references that are in the description to learn a little bit more. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, then give me a thumbs up and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Catch you then.